Who was Caroline Crouch, the young woman whose life was tragically cut short? Caroline Crouch was a young woman full of life and dreams. Born on July 12, 2001 in Athens, she was the daughter of a retired engineer and his wife of Filipino descent. Caroline's life seemed idyllic as she balanced her studies with her role as a mother to her infant daughter. However, beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect life, dark clouds were gathering, leading to a tragedy that would shock the nation. Was their marriage as perfect as it appeared, or were there cracks hidden beneath the surface? To the outside world, Caroline and Babis's marriage was the epitome of happiness. Friends and family saw a loving couple, deeply devoted to each other and their newborn daughter. Social media was adorned with pictures of their adventures and shared moments. Yet behind closed doors, subtle signs of strain began to emerge, hinting at a reality far removed from the perfect image they projected. What transpired behind the closed doors of their home on that fateful night? In the early hours of May 11, 2021, the tranquility of the Anagnostopoulos household was shattered. The night was still, with only the faint hum of the city in the distance. Inside, shadows danced on the walls, and the silence was palpable. Unbeknownst to anyone outside, a horrifying sequence of events was unfolding, leading to an unimaginable tragedy. Could the scene of the crime reveal more than what meets the eye? The scene that greeted the first responders was one of chaos and violence. Furniture lay overturned, personal belongings were scattered, and the lifeless body of the family dog added a chilling note. At first glance, it appeared to be a brutal home invasion. However, subtle inconsistencies began to emerge, raising questions about the authenticity of the scene and the true nature of the events that transpired. What did the first clues uncovered by the police suggest about the crime? As dawn broke, the Glycanera residence became a hive of investigative activity. Forensic experts combed through the disarray, collecting fingerprints, fibers, and any trace of the intruders. Detectives scrutinized every detail, yet certain elements seemed out of place. The lack of forced entry, untouched valuables, and the methodical nature of the scene began to sow seeds of doubt about the initial narrative of a violent burglary. His story painted him as the sole survivor of a harrowing night. But was it the truth? Babis Anagnostopoulos told a chilling tale of armed intruders breaking into their home, tying him up, and murdering his wife as their infant daughter slept nearby. His voice trembled as he described the harrowing ordeal, but his calm, composed demeanor raised eyebrows. To the detectives, his account was vivid yet curiously detached, like someone recounting a practiced story rather than reliving a nightmare. A grieving husband or a master manipulator? The line between the two began to blur. Caroline's funeral was a heart-wrenching affair. Family and friends gathered to bid farewell to a young life stolen too soon. Her husband, Babis, stood beside her parents, shedding tears and offering comfort. Yet some couldn't shake the feeling that there was something performative about his grief, as if he were playing a role rather than mourning a loss. The evidence didn't lie, but it told a story very different from his. As forensic scientists examined the evidence, cracks began to form in Babis's narrative. The lack of forced entry, the precise placement of overturned furniture, and the absence of a struggle all painted a picture that didn't align with the supposed chaos of a burglary. The evidence didn't just raise questions, it practically shouted them. Why was Baby so calm in the face of unspeakable tragedy? The investigators couldn't ignore the mounting inconsistencies in Babis's story. His calm demeanor, the lack of evidence supporting his claims, and the meticulously staged crime scene all pointed to something darker. As they pieced together the puzzle, a troubling pattern began to emerge, one that suggested the danger wasn't from intruders, but from within. The media frenzy turned a private tragedy into a public spectacle. The story captivated a nation. Headlines described the brutal murder, the grieving husband, and the unanswered questions surrounding the crime. As the media dissected every detail, public opinion shifted from sympathy to suspicion. The spotlight wasn't just on the tragedy, it was on Babis himself. The lies began to crumble under the weight of scrutiny. The detectives weren't just piecing together a case, they were dismantling a facade. Every inconsistency they uncovered tightened the noose around Babis's carefully constructed lie. And as the evidence piled up, his calm demeanor began to crack, revealing the pressure he could no longer withstand. After weeks of deceit, the mask finally slipped. The truth emerged not in triumph, but in the heavy silence of a man breaking under his own lies. Babis admitted to the unthinkable, that he had smothered Caroline during an argument, then staged the entire scene to disguise his guilt. His confession was chilling, methodical, and utterly devoid of the grief he had so convincingly displayed before. The nation's sympathy turned to outrage as the truth came to light. The revelation of Babis's guilt sparked outrage across Greece. The husband who had been hailed as a grieving victim was now exposed as a cold-blooded killer. Public sympathy turned into calls for accountability, not just for Caroline's death, but for the countless victims of domestic violence whose voices had been silenced. Would justice be served, or would the system fail Caroline? The trial was a spectacle, drawing the attention of a nation still reeling from the revelations. The prosecution painted a harrowing picture of control, violence, and deception, while the defense struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence. Through it all, Babis sat motionless, his face a mask that betrayed nothing. Her life was stolen, but her story sparked a movement. Caroline's death left a void in the lives of those who loved her, but it also ignited a movement. Her story became a rallying cry for survivors of abuse, and a stark reminder of the need to address the systemic failures that allowed her suffering to remain hidden. In her name, change began to take root. Would the punishment fit the crime, or would justice fall short? After weeks of harrowing testimony and irrefutable evidence, the verdict was delivered. Guilty of murder and staging a crime scene. Babis Anagnostopoulos was sentenced to life in prison. For Caroline's family, it was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but no punishment could undo the loss they had endured. The man who had controlled every aspect of his life now faced a future he couldn't escape. For the rest of his life, Babis would wake up in the confines of a prison cell, a far cry from the life of comfort and control he had once enjoyed. Stripped of his freedom, he was left to face the weight of his actions in solitude. A fitting end for a man who had taken so much from others. For Caroline's parents, the pain of losing their daughter was a wound that would never fully heal. Caroline's parents carried the weight of their loss with quiet dignity. Their home, once filled with laughter, was now a place of reflection and mourning. Yet, amidst their grief, they found purpose in raising Caroline's daughter and in speaking out to ensure their tragedy would not be in vain. Caroline's story left a mark far beyond her family, forcing a nation to confront its blind spots. Caroline's death became a catalyst for change, sparking debates about the systemic failures that allowed her suffering to go unnoticed. From Parliament to public forums, her story forced a reckoning with the hidden epidemic of domestic violence, leading to reforms and resources aimed at protecting those at risk. Caroline's life may have been cut short, but her story continues to inspire hope and action. Caroline's legacy is one of resilience and change, Though her life was tragically cut short, her story continues to inspire action and awareness, ensuring that her voice echoes in the fight against domestic violence. In her name, countless lives have been touched, saved, and empowered to break the cycle of silence and fear.